The subject this morning is living without fear. First, let us ask the question, what is fear? There are two great forces in the universe. On one side, we have love, and on the other side, hate. Under hate, we find fear. We fear those things which we hate. We fear the effect of those things. And so fear is an emotional state of consciousness varying from simple unrest, lack of ease, caused by worries, real and imagined, to the extreme state of paralysis and even death, caused by the violent reaction of the strong emotion of fear. Now, what are the kinds of fear? They are physical, mental, and spiritual. Under physical fears, we find the fear of ill health or accident causing pain or incapacitating us. This is one of the greatest causes of fear. Physical fear of pain. That is, we fear ill health because we know that it will cause us pain and discomfiture, or we fear accident because it will either cause us pain or incapacitate us, or both. And so physical fear of pain is one of the greatest kinds of fear. Second, unnecessary fear. We have an illustration of this in mothers. The mother's fear for the child, fear of bodily harm overtaking the child. I have one good illustration of this, of the lady who lived in the apartment below us in a house back in Boston. The little girl was out playing in the yard. I was out in the yard at the time. And an airplane was circling above the house, a reasonable distance, when suddenly the mother rushed out and said, "Ann, you come in the house this minute before that airplane might fall on you." And so you see that is a case of unnecessary fear. And then the third kind of fear under physical fear of bodily harm, we find the cases of phobias. Phobias of entering a subway, or being on tall buildings, or in open spaces. These are all phobias. I have an illustration of that type of fear. One of the ladies in Boston had the fear of going in the subway, and she would take the surface car and cover miles and miles before reaching the center of Boston, which by the subway would take just exactly 10 minutes. And so we see that these phobias are a certain kind of fear. Now going on to mental kinds of fear. We have fear of unfulfilled desire. Fear that those things which we cherish to come about will not come about. And there are many, many of these. And then under mental fear we have also the fear of failure or loss. Loss of money, loss of position, loss of friends, and so forth. All sorts of mental fears. And then we have the inferiority complex, which is a state of fear. Fear that we will be unable to cope with a situation which arises. And so these three types are types of mental fears. Then we have spiritual fear. Under this we find the fear of death, with its uncertainties. And we fear that with death will come oblivion. And this, of course, is the greatest fear, because we fear not only we lose our body and our mind, but we lose our identity. Now let us go on to the effects of fear. First, on the physical body. It has been scientifically proven that poisons and undesirable substances are emptied into the bloodstream during the paroxysm from the emotions of fear and anger. And what is the result of this? These poisons and these undesirable substances cause reactions in the body, varying from an irritated nervous system, that is, we call it a jumpy state, with impaired function, to the other extreme of even death. Let us take an illustration first of specific effects of fear. Definite things that happen due to fear. I had a case of a taxi cab driver who came to me for treatment. He was running the taxi cab business alone. He was working many, many hours a day without rest. And this particular condition which he had would not respond to treatment. After a few weeks, one day he came in, his face was changed, and he said, "I've sold my taxi cab business." And from then on, there was a complete change in the healing of his condition. Something had been removed so that healing took place in good order. Another illustration of the specific effects of fear is of a young man who was with me in college. He was in a group of several who were being initiated into this fraternity. And I remember he came after I was in line. And when it came his turn, so great was his fear of bodily injury, that he collapsed and began to cry like a baby. And his condition was such that the initiation was done away with, and he was just simply given the oath and admitted. And yet, within a few weeks from that time, I saw him in the city of Chelsea after a devastating fire, and there he was in the middle of the street in the uniform of the militia, directing traffic as big as life. In other words, he had that particular fear within his mind, and the effect was devastating, to say the least. Now, another effect of fear is this, that sickness will usually follow a paroxysm of fear and especially anger. People sometimes will be sick for days after a paroxysm of emotion, of fear or anger. And then in the case of animals, and sometimes humans, paralysis takes place. So great is the fear. Now, so much for the physical effects of fear. But perhaps the greatest effect of fear is on our minds and consciousness. The mind is in a turmoil, robbing us of efficiency in all things, and especially in meditation. Because of the effect of fear on our minds, we lose our peace of mind. And this comes only when we still the waves of turmoil within us and stop the thought processes long enough to be free from the worries and turmoil of fear. But in the second case, we are prevented by this fear of receiving and having the perception of cosmic peace and bliss, the cosmic peace and bliss of the soul. So you can see that no doubt the effect of fear on our mind is even greater than on our physicality. With this effect of fear on the mind, we see through colored glasses, so to speak. If you look out through the window and the glass is stained and colored, the whole outside seems different. The whole world seems different. As the Englishman says, the whole world is rotten. And so we must not allow the effect of fear to keep our minds in a turmoil and prevent us from not only attaining peace of mind, but the far greater thing, peace of soul, or oneness with God. To live without fear, we must necessarily know the cause of fear. The underlying metaphysical cause of fear is this: that we are going to suffer pain. Now you may feel that is not so, but if you will introspect and analyze, you will feel that behind all fear is the idea that you are going to suffer pain in your physical, mental, or spiritual states of consciousness. Now, the basic reason that we fear pain and suffering is that we feel our separation from God. If you felt one with Him, if you saw His infinite light and became one with that, no fear could be with you. And so the basic reason of this metaphysical cause of fear, that we are going to suffer pain, is that we feel our separation from God. Now, if we remove this cause permanently by realizing our oneness or our kinship with God, how can there be any fear, physical, mental, or spiritual? And that's why Jesus said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven." Seek ye first God contact, wherein you can perceive the kingdom of heaven, the land of the fourth dimension. Perceive that, and you will relieve permanently the idea that you are separate from God, and you will remove the cause of pain permanently, because eternal consciousness cannot fear or feel pain. To live without fear, we must also know how to remove the cause of fear permanently. The cause of fear is in the identification with outward or waking consciousness, because in this consciousness is duality and change. It is this change, this duality, which causes us to suffer. Now, emotional patterns in the unconscious mind keep feeding your waking consciousness. There is great unrest, great uncontrolled action or automatic action going on. St. Paul said, "I do not know why I do these things." These impulses came from the unconscious mind and suggested to his waking consciousness, and he performed action. Outward change, outward consciousness equals duality and change. Now this is the important point. The soul becomes identified with this outward consciousness and feels and experiences this duality and change, and therefore fears. Just like the illustration of the wave and the ocean. If you are identified with the wave, you realize that it changes and finally subsides. and its form is lost. But if you are identified with the ocean of spirit, you realize that a portion of that ocean makes the wave. And when the wave recedes, you still realize your oneness with the ocean. And so, in conclusion, to live permanently without fear, we must first break the idea of separation from God. Break the idea that we are the wave of the ocean. We often sing that chant of the Masters, I am the bubble, make me the sea. How to do this? When we realize that we are the sea, that we are one with the great ocean that causes all things, one with the great ocean of divine consciousness, only then will we be satisfied. Only then, when we merge in Him, in the sea of divine love, in His divine consciousness, will we banish fear forever. God is love. In the Bible, 1 John, the 4th chapter, we read that God is love, and we also read in the 16th and 18th verses that perfect love casteth out all fear. In other words, we can have perfect love only when we merge in God. Otherwise it is not perfect love. And so self-realization gives us the techniques and the methods to merge in God and have that perfect love. Merging in the divine love of God, we can say, as the Master used to often say, I stand unshaken through the crash of breaking worlds. And we can also say, with Lord Shankara, I am He, blissful Spirit, I am He. Now we can only say this when we have merged in the great ocean of God's divine love. Self-realization fellowship gives you the practical methods and techniques whereby you can merge in this infinite love of God. Follow those techniques. You have everything that is necessary. You do not have to run here and there. You do not have to be, as one of the students said, metaphysical hobos. You have everything right within your hand to follow and practice the techniques given by the Master, because he was one with that ocean of spirit. He lived in that ocean. And so if you follow one who knows the ocean of God's love, then you likewise, merging in that ocean, can live without fear.